For the past few years, I have had the opportunity to travel throughout the Muslim world, to look at the different communities where Muslims find themselves either in a majority situation or a minority, and also to seek guidance from Islamic leaders, to try to look at the situation that we are in and to understand what is going on in the world. And after a long time in the field, I've really come to the conclusion that we are at the doorstep of a great change. It is like the calm before a storm. And for many people who have embraced Islam, the times that we live in now are very confusing. And there's a sort of tension that people feel when they come to Islamic events. And sometimes there's misunderstanding. And although the numbers of Muslims are increasing, we also find to a certain extent that in some areas tension is also increasing and misunderstanding. And this, I believe, is can be attributed to deception. This word is ghurur in the Arabic language. And deception is a terrible thing. It can come internally, it can come externally. It comes through the mass media, it comes through the mouth of people, and sometimes even within the mind of the individual, there can be forms of deception. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Yunus, in the 16th verse, has told us, فَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ افْتَرَى عَلَى اللَّهِ كَذِبًا أَوْ كَذَّبَ بِآيَاتِهِ إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الْمُجْرِمُونَ. Allah tells us, and who is more unjust than he who forges a lie against Allah or denies his signs? Surely the criminals, the wrongdoers, will never be successful. This is a very strong verse. And this word mujrim, talking about ijram, is a very strong description of deceiving people, of presenting the image image. And what we have noticed is that when the word Islam comes to the surface, when people are from the mainstream hear the word Islam or Muslims, an image of negativity comes to their minds and their hearts. And we did a study in Toronto. We went to the different corporations. It was an anti-racist study. And this is where we were testing the psychology of people in relationship to different ethnic groups or different physically or mentally challenged people. And so there was a person who was a native, and there was a working woman, and there was a person of African descent, and I was the Muslim in this psychological test. And so they asked the people, look at the picture. And for instance, the picture would show them ice, and they answer cold. They see sugar, and they answer sweet. And then they saw Muslim or Islam. And every single person in the corporation answered violence. Some of them said holy violence. They said holy violence. And so when I began to explain to them that the word Islam, the very word itself, comes from peace, and it really means finding peace in submission to the Creator, and beginning to explain what Islam is, the people were in confusion because what was presented to them, what they took in to be reality, was something different than what we know about Islam or we have learned about Islam historically in the Muslim world. This is a case of deception. Last week, I was called to New York. The week before to New Jersey. And in one of the gatherings, we were in the Schomburg Institute for Black Culture in Harlem, and there was a program about slavery in Mauritania. And there were people there who had the actual footage of slave trade going on, or what appeared to be slave trade. And they were focusing on Mauritania. And when we listened to the terminologies being used, and I was asked to be on the panel of the people, when we investigated the terminologies being used, When we investigated what was actually being said, we realized that the focus of that night was not upon the few sick individuals in Mauritania or wherever it may be who are trying to capture people or control people. It wasn't on that. But the real agenda was to paint an image that Islam allows slavery, encourages slavery. It is the religion of slavery, to present a negative image so that African American people would not embrace Islam. Because we know when you talk about slavery in America, you are talking about one of the most hateful concepts to the African people living in the West. And so by innocently coming in and presenting slave trade in Mauritania, or so-called slave trade, what was happening is that an image of that part of the world where many of the great scholars of Islam came from, an image would be presented that would be a negative image, that doesn't really deal with the issue itself on the ground, but spends more time being negative in a general sense about Islam.